So thank you for joining me, Tyler, Clarissa, and Mark. Yes, everybody in order. All right, so I'm going to ask some questions of the panel, and we'll just discuss the book and have your perspective and just answer briefly. Try to limit our answers to 2 minutes each so we can get through some of these questions. And then we'll open it up for the audience. So, as we look at the zero-sum theory, how do you believe that it has had its impact in Lexington? Want to start, Tyler?
That's fine. No, I think it's a compelling argument, and I remember in 1999 there was a book published called Non-Zero, with the thesis that as we were coming into this technological age in the new millennium and increasing globalization, that humanity would reach a point where our interactions would be a non-zero sum game, that everyone could benefit. It wasn't a situation where one person could gain only at another person's expense. But unfortunately, as Spooky points out in the book, our mindset too much has been driven by this idea that advocating or advancing for others somehow means that I have to sacrifice in some way, shape, or form. So a challenge for us, particularly in the midst of a pandemic where we've all shared in this experience, but it's also brought into stark relief some of the disparities that do exist in our community, of how can we reorient our focus or reorient our conversations and our interactions with one another so that our focus is on the shared progress that we can make, and that when we move forward together, that's to everyone's benefit and not to anyone's detriment. So I think it's a conversation that's relevant not only to us as a country, as we heard at the TED Talk, but to us in Lexington, especially coming out of a pandemic and a crisis that put a strain and a test on all of our institutions, on all of our relationships, and unfortunately too, in a political climate environment where there are forces that are seeking to appeal to some of the worst instincts. And I don't think that that's who we are or who we want to be. And so the challenge for us as leaders and for everyone in our community is how can we get past the noise and have these meaningful conversations.
Sure. Clarissa, would you like to add anything?
I forgot the question.
Oh, sure. It was how have you seen the zero-sum thinking impact Lexington?
I don't think it's necessarily unique to Lexington, but the way that our schools are funded definitely puts certain communities at a disadvantage, not just because it's based on tax dollars, but it's based on attendance and how many students are in the schools. And when you have a depressed community because of redlining or whichever, you have less students, you have more transient families. So the fact that the majority of our students in our school district are Black and brown, and that the concentration of poor performing schools are in certain neighborhoods, that's a nationwide issue that's not really unique to Lexington, but I do see it being played out.
Mark, you wrote an article that kind of addresses this, though.
Yeah, at the Lehman Report, we tried to focus more on solutions rather than discussing how terrible the problem is and how to move forward. And the racism problem is something that I've seen for my whole life, and I've seen it within my own family when my sister's second husband was Black, and then my father never spoke to her again. He grew up in Alabama, but he had just attitudes that were this divisive outlook that we still hear promoted so much today. And somehow it's a challenge for us to look at this in a collective way, and that something that benefits you can also benefit me. And since I've been at the Lane Report and looking a lot at financial information and trying to just understand how money works for all of us, it's such a complex system, but I have really come to focus on growth of our GDP. It sounds abstract, but it really, truly benefits all of us when there's just more money out there, because money circulates and gets respent, and every additional dollar that I get, I spend most of it. And right now, there's a crew at my house today putting new siding on my house, and so every dollar that each of us gets, it expands and benefits each other when we spend it. And one of the things that I took a class when I was at UK 40 years ago. I was just trying to get a broad education, which they wanted you to do in journalism. You were forced to take a lot of your classes outside of journalism just so you would understand the world. And I took a monetary economics class, and it kind of blew my mind that to try and understand that banks create money and wealth when they make a loan to you, because we put our money in the bank, and the money in my account stays there, but then the bank under our system is allowed to loan it out, and it becomes new money in Tyler's account when he makes a loan. I still have my money in my account. Tyler still has his money in his account, and he spends it. He has borrowed that money for a purpose, and it creates new wealth. And the more that we can do it, the more we all benefit. There's more money there for all of us, and it's an abstract concept to understand. I had a hard time grasping it then, and I've had to really look at it hard again in the last few years to try and get my arms around it. And this attitude of our collective financial wealth and how interconnected we are is just something that doesn't get talked about enough. We could certainly benefit from more financial education in school, which I would encourage Tyler to consider as part of the curriculum, because the more each of us understands just about basic finances and that it can really benefit us to take a little debt sometimes, because when we pay it, if we pay it back, if we pay it back, then we've created new wealth. If we don't pay it back, then it starts moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So one of the things that Heather McGee illustrates in the book is, about the public good or public pools. How would you, or are there other public pools that you can identify in our community that have been a sore spot for this zero sum thinking?
I haven't seen direct evidence of that recently in Lexington, since I've been back in town for the last 15 years. I think we've kind of been trying to move in the other direction. The Lyric Theater was renovated. The city council had the insight to try and revive this institution in the east side of town. And this is taking a while. They're still trying to get their programs going and get that more vibrant, and just getting more activity, more interaction. The more we have, the better. I think it manifests some, not so much in racial terms, but just in NIMBYism. We all understand we need more housing, we need more these projects, but don't put it right in my neighborhood, please.
And I think being a college town, it's very evident when we look at when she talks about in the 80s when higher education went from a public good to more privatization, and people had to take out loans and things like that. So we're seeing our universities being affected by that, particularly UK and BCTC since they're public institutions. But students really struggling with the value of their education, if they should do it, because tuition has gotten so expensive and out of reach for so many. And the solution is get in debt for it. And that is something that, coming from UK to work there, it's pretty evident.
And from my perspective, I would say that we run the risk of our public schools becoming a public good where this is a mindset. And that's why a lot of the rhetoric and the conversation around public education today is concerning. Because public education is the ultimate public service, and it renders incredible benefits. Ms. McGee talked about investing in our people. Investing in public education is investing in our most critical people, our children, because that's the future. You can't have economic development without having an educated citizenry. And it's one of the reasons why Fayette County Lexington's done so well, is the strength of our public schools and the partnerships that we've had. But at the same time, and Clarissa pointed this out, inequities persist. And we've tried to do what we can to level the funding playing field, but there's only so much we can do at a local level, right? And increasingly, the local burden has increased as compared to the state contribution. So we can't ignore that conversation that's happening and the threat that our public schools are under and facing right now. And a lot of it's couched in these terms because, you want to slice and dice our schools and our children based on test scores and other things. One of the things the pandemic reminded us is schools are being asked to do quite a bit, and we can't do the work alone. It has to be a community endeavor. And we have schools, there's some excellent work and research done on this, but we have schools that they can have the PTA underwrite a lot of the programming and resources available, but that's not an option available in every one of our schools. And so how do we have those tough and serious conversations that impact ultimately our most critical investment?
Absolutely. Those are really great responses, guys. With the current political climate, how do you think that the zero-sum thinking has made things better? And how can Lexington move beyond the zero-sum to the solidarity dividends?
I honestly think that school choice is another one of those dog whistles. Again, public schools, a lot of systems are primarily black and brown children, and it's dog whistling. Students, basically parents should have a choice who their students go to school with. Some may disagree, but I think it's one of those dog whistles that's getting louder and louder because all the things we already know that we don't really need to discuss in detail here. Don't want to get too political, but that's what I think. So instead of pouring into and fixing the way that our schools are funded and they're taking resources away, and you can have a voucher for private school or you can do a charter school, and studies show that a lot of things about charter schools. So we really need to get back to a sense of community and go into your neighborhood school, whether you're retired and you don't have a child in the system, in the schools. It's still a benefit to all of us to have an educated society. Yeah, that's what I think.
I like the fact that Lexington elections and I think the school board too are nonpartisan. that allows us to bypass, the first giant hurdle of divisiveness, and I think it's benefited us a lot. And if we could make all elections nonpartisan, or primaries anyway, it would benefit us a lot. There's just some element of human nature that buys into that zero-sum game all the time, and I think about it regularly. How in the world do we get past that? Because it hurts all of us. I agree very much with the premise of the book that this zero-sum game hurts us. When I can't remember what specifically prompted me to write this perspective in the February issue, but I saw some kind of information. Well, I think it was something that was being presented on a show I was watching. I watch a lot of public affairs shows and policy stuff, but I saw how this racial wealth gap, the data that I found, and I think Heather cites it in her book, is that black families tend to have 1/10 the wealth of white families. And I thought about that, and I thought, I looked at our total GDP for, that the United States is, I was just looking that up on it, I think we're at about $22 trillion a year. And we are stepping on the hose to keep growth from happening with our racism. We are preventing opportunity to black and brown and other minority families. We're preventing them from getting good educations. We're preventing them from getting the loans that can create wealth for all of us. And if the black population is 15% of the United States, and they have 1/10 of the wealth of most other families, but when I look at the numbers, that means that that 15%, instead of being 15%, they should have the same average wealth as all the other families, because the potential of all of us is the same. If we get education and opportunity, you can see that over and over. But I calculate that this 15% producing only 1.5% of the wealth, we're missing out on about 13.5% of our potential GDP every year. And that's like $3 trillion every year that would benefit all of us.
Well, I agree with you on the potential. I do. And we have people who are black and brown who are still making, historically have made less money for doing the exact same job. They are charged more interest on their loans. So they have smaller paychecks and then they're paying more out. So yes, education is important, and even the good paying, as Heather McGee talked in the book, those good paying manufacturing jobs, a lot of times, side by side, it's still not equitable. It's still harder for black and brown families to build wealth because, Mercedes just had a class action suit, I think, for charging more to minorities for their cars. We saw what happened with the housing market. It's pervasive.
I think we would benefit from more discussion of the cost. Just like she says, it's costing all of us by paying this person less. We are stepping on our ability to create wealth that grows the pie for everybody.
Well, and to Clarissa's point too is the extent to which the inequities snowball, and we see it, in the public school setting, and then it trickles on up. I mean, you look at our kindergarten screeners and who's coming to school prepared and ready for kindergarten, and the children who have access to daycare or whose families have the flexibility to spend more time at home, or they're exposed to more words before they get to school, they're more likely to be kindergarten ready. And if you come to school kindergarten ready, then you've essentially got a head start. And so, we talk about opportunity gaps and achievement gaps and all of those things, and expect that those solutions can be solved just within the confines and settings of a public school. When it's, again, it takes all of us. It goes back to this non-zero sum mentality where we've got to share in the responsibility, because the inequities are not only pervasive, but they snowball and they pile up, and it gets to a point where it becomes very difficult to address once it's got out of our control.
Exactly, because sometimes kindergarten readiness are the things that you said, but can we not have any lead paint in the houses in any of our neighborhoods? Like, how long have we known that causes developmental problems in children? Why is there still lead paint? Sorry. Clean drinking water. And so those things affect cognitive development too. So, even before that, it's like people deserve a safe environment in which to live. So, whether you're poor or not, no matter what. So, those are some things I think we need to tackle, because we've known about it for quite a long time.
Yeah, you brought me to my next point. Like, what do you think that it will take? She mentions these are birthed through bad policy. So what do you think that it will take to dismantle these systems in order to so we can all prosper?
I know. Marketing, you have to just talk about the benefits of doing the right thing over and over and over. At the Lehman Report, we make our living. My paycheck exists because we convince people to market, and I've learned more and more about the marketing side as I've really focused on the fact that it produces my paycheck. And the more you present a message, the more it sinks in, and we have to talk about the benefits of doing the right thing more. We just have to find a way to have more conversations to discuss the fact that it literally will put more dollars in everybody's pocket. Everybody responds to the pocketbook issues, and if the racist attitudes are perpetuated because they get spoken more. They are spoken and spoken and spoken, and there's not enough resistance. And somehow we have to find a way to talk about the benefits of the right thing more. I like to use the analogy of the power of marketing. I don't know how it was 5 or 10 years ago. There started being these commercials on TV for the Snuggie blanket that had arms in it. And the first time you saw that commercial, you thought, that is the stupidest thing I have ever seen in my life. And the commercial kept coming on over and over. And I don't know how many times I saw that commercial, but there's 2 Snuggies at my house. Repeating a message, it works. It works. We have to talk about the benefits, the literal benefits to all of us of not being racist.
And I like how you put it into like dollars and cents. I think that's translatable to the consumer.
Everybody responds to, it's going to give me more money. I think I want to do it.
Right.
Most of the time.
One thing I thought that was compelling, is similar to that point that Heather makes in the book, is the idea of a shared narrative, of getting on the same page, sharing the same story. What's our narrative? And recognizing what we have in common. Where we have some parents, obviously, who could never imagine what it will be like sitting at the dinner table having the talk with their black son about what to do if they have an interaction with a police officer. We have parents who could not possibly imagine sending their kids to bed hungry. They don't know what it's like. We have parents who don't know what it's like to dread the holiday season because their child's not going to have the same holiday that everyone else has. But that doesn't mean that they don't all share the same passion, desire, commitment, and concern for what's best for their child. And that can be a powerful unifying force of we may not be able to have the same shared experiences, the same conversations, but at least at the fundamental level, we can connect with our shared concern and desire for the best interests of our children and everyone else in our community. And that it doesn't have to be a different experience means, well, my experience is better than yours, or my experience has to change so that your experience can improve. That doesn't need to be the conversation. And so creating that shared narrative and story and having conversations and building relationships. I tell this to my students all the time too. At the end of the day, it's about relationships, because it's easy to attack and demean two-dimensional characters and folks that we've reduced to stereotypes or social media accounts. It's harder to do that when we start to understand folks' perspectives. And to me, that's where at the community level, events like this, in our libraries, our public schools, our local government organizations, that's where we can truly have a huge difference, is bringing folks together just to have conversations and recognizing those shared perspectives.
That was powerful. You mentioned something about shared experience and in storytelling, which that goes to Mark's point about marketing. It's marketing or sharing these experiences, sharing and how they can impact us all for good. Thank you all for your candid responses. Last question I'm going to ask of the panel is, what is one thing you can do this week to move towards solidarity? In your space, in your, what's one thing you can do? Maybe not this week, maybe this year.
It's a challenge. We all, nowadays, all of us are so busy just trying to fend for ourselves that it's hard to find the energy to step out and try and reach out and embrace our neighbor and get to know them and think about these public issues. I'm not sure what exactly I'm going to do. I like to think that journalism helps create that community, that marketplace of ideas and sharing information. I've just always enjoyed that aspect of what I do, and it's just provided a sense of fulfillment to me to play some part in that function, because I just think there's such a benefit. But just saying hello and to more people and smiling and reaching out, and sometimes just in the supermarket when I'm walking past somebody, instead of the stone face, I've got to get my cereal, I'll just look at that person and just smile and just share a little moment briefly. Hey, we're here shopping together.
Well, I'm going to share the book and others like it. The Color of Law comes to mind, The New Jim Crow, Education, Awareness, and Action, please. The other thing that I do and will continue to do is plan our programs, our high quality programs here at the library that really affect educational outcomes, but that are free to all communities, to all members of our community. those who can't afford to go to Austin Inc. We have coding here also. And students get that exposure in our state-of-the-art STEAM lab, our Cloyber Foundation STEAM lab. So I will continue to do the work to bring these opportunities to the entire community.
And I will continue advocating for public schools as our greatest laboratories of democracy and our foundation of our democracy, and not just in my work with the school board, but I think where I can have the most impact, to your question, is in my classroom with my students, because again, that gives me my greatest energy and joy in engaging my students in these conversations and soliciting their input and analyzing these perspectives from their angle and the role that they're going to play in the future to help take that meaningful and informed action to move us forward. Because I think these are not easy conversations, certainly, but they're vital conversations. And no better place to have those conversations than in an environment like a classroom where discussion can be stimulating, structured, and meaningful.
Well, I think you all have heard tonight some very poignant responses from our panelists as it relates to zero-sum thinking and its impact in Lexington and across our country. So we're going to move our conversation to the audience and allow you to have input or ask questions of the panelists. I'm going to give you some ground rules as we begin. So this is a public discussion and it's not a debate. So we're going to respect everyone who has thoughts and is willing to share their thoughts with the audience or with all of us here tonight. No one person's going to dominate the conversation, and so I'm going to ask you to limit your comments, if you will, please, to 2 minutes per comment, and then give someone else an opportunity to speak or to respond. When you do speak, state your name and state where you're from. So that could be the neighborhood that you live in, or broadly Lexington, Kentucky. And listen, I just invite you all to listen and encourage you to do that. You may, another point of view may be sparked tonight, and we do encourage the curiosity to happen in this room around the conversation of race and the zero-sum theory and how it affects all of us. And then we're going to, another paper says, seek first to understand, not to be understood. But I'm going to add also to assume best intentions. When listening to someone's point of view that you may not agree with, assume that they are coming with their best intentions, that they don't have any ill will or any divisiveness in their tone. So I'm inviting the audience to speak. Anybody want to go first? That's always the hardest part. Is like once somebody breaks the ice, it's just...
I'll go first.
Sure.
All of you said at one time.
Say your name and where you're from.
Bruce Engel. I've lived in Lexington 42 years, I think, something like that. Most have been employed by the Herald Leader. Then they stopped. Then they paid me to stop working. This is a whole nother deal. All of you said at one time, all the people, everyone, everybody, but it's not really everybody. It's only about 95, 98%. And then there's what they tend to call the 1%, which I think is really more like 5. It's the people with the money. And they've got that top 5% has 50% of the wealth or something like that. And as far as I can see, they have virtually all the power by duping the poor people into fighting against each other. It is zero sum in that when that factory decides to not unionize, it would have helped both people, both sets, the white workers and the black workers, to unionize. But who benefited from them not organizing? The owners of the factory. And it's zero sum because if they both win, the black workers and the white workers both win, where does that money come from? Who loses? The owners, who have to share more of the profits.
And is it really losing because they still have billions of dollars in profits, right?
Yeah,
So whether-
yeah. No, they're not going,
Right.
they're not being poor. But
Exactly.
instead of having $1 billion, they've got maybe 750 million, not
I
1,200
would be
million.
okay with that, yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
You bring up an interesting point. I think that's what, where we have to try to draw buy-in or from the workers as well as those who own those businesses. Does paying employees more or unionized employees, does giving them what they want, how does that benefit you? And then it would make it a better place to work probably. Which would increase performance, which would increase, it would, so there are other ways to tell the story to get folks to buy in.
There are many factories in this country where the workers themselves can't afford to buy the product. There's nothing else that makes it turns your employees into customers as well.
That's a good point.
Well, and it connects to Heather's point about the racist practices and policies tend to ultimately actually adversely impact the folks exerting the privilege, and the irony of it.
I want to say something. I totally agree.
Your name
Oh,
and where
sorry.
you're from.
I'm Brenna, and
Would you mind standing, please?
Oh, sure. I'm Brenna, and I live in the Aylesford neighborhood. I just want to say I agree with this gentleman's point about the class differences. And I think that sort of makes any solution to these problems that much more difficult, because you have these sort of two, I kind of sometimes think that for the 1%, 15% or 5% as he said, they understand that sort of like surface differences are a good way to get people to fight with one another, to not understand that, these are goods for everyone. So, like Mr. Green said, you work on solutions. So what is the solution to fighting the battle on these two fronts? Because I think that's really what it is. It's a race issue and it's a class issue. And I think that Heather McGee talks, I think that she illustrates that really well in her book.
I don't think that we have any kind of instant solution to this. It's going to be a long, slow process. In recent years, I've read a number of histories on it. Last year I read this book. It was essentially the history of civilization, starting from the Fertile Crescent and moving through. It ended in Rome, with the fall of Rome in about 500 AD. And the whole world economy was based on declaring war on your neighbor and going and taking their gold and whatever they had and enslaving them. Slavery was a massive part of the world economy for thousands of years. And we, we're not that far down the road from that. Human nature is kind of an ugly thing. I find human nature is very selfish, and fortunately we have the human spirit, which is more expansive and looks communally. But there's in our DNA from long, long ago, for thousands of generations, our existence relied on being inside our tribe, inside our group. That was our protection. If you were outside the group, you're probably going to die. And that's still an element within our DNA. We've made a lot of progress. Martin Luther King. I can't cite the quote exactly, but what the arc of justice.
More arc of the inverse is long, but it bends towards justice.
It bends towards justice. We're improving, but it's slow. It's slow. I think things are better now than they've ever been You know, we still have so far to go, but the 1% is not going to turn around and let their factory unionize without a fight. It's that tribal protecting me and mine and my stuff, and you know, we need to somehow turn the focus more towards this growing the pie for everybody. You know, if they will pay their workers more, they might be able to buy their own product and make more money for the factory owner. And you know, but we don't talk about that commonality enough. And it's our politics in some form have definitely gotten worse and more divisive in recent years, and you know, there's a strong racist element to it. You know, we know that was the beginning, the foundation, cornerstone of Donald Trump's campaign that was successful, got him elected president, was being racist and saying Barack Obama was not even from America. And that was the foundation that he grew his public campaign from. And we have allowed money, we've loosened up the flow of money, and it has allowed the 1% to give lots and lots of money to elected officials to then give them advantages. And the advantages have worsened. You know, we can see those statistics that 25 or 30 years ago, CEOs only made 58 times as much as the employee, and now it's 250 or sometimes 1,000 times more than the employee. You know, so we have this system that we have to, I don't know how we're going to cleanse our politics of it, of allowing the people with the money to buy even more advantage.
Any other questions? Sure. Your name and where you're from.
My name is Megan, and I'm from Lexington. Mine's not so much a question, but I guess I want to open up like this conversation too. It seems like a lot of the interconnectivity between racism and capitalism. So how much, like, what is the history there, and how connected are those two, and how has our economic system allowed for that space and for that to continue? It seems like it's as much a question of our economic system that continues to not put limits on economic growth and allows for greater divide. So I don't know, it's more of a open to comments on that.
Sure.
Well, I can't answer that, but I was also just thinking about capitalism. I think that in the book, Heather McGee says, well, within the context of our capitalist country, it didn't have to be this way. So I feel like she's saying her argument doesn't necessarily link capitalism with racism as I read it. But I didn't quite get to the end of the phrase I was trying to formulate as I was listening, but I was hearing, okay, so there's a certain extent to which this argument that she presents and that we're, seeing the merit in is, well, we'll abandon a moral argument in favor of, self-interest and go with, if you don't care about the other people, then at least you care about your pocketbook. But then is there a certain point at which somebody might object to, there's obviously, I think, a use for that, but is there a point, and at what point would I or you or anybody just say, well, no, that's not cool either, because I don't want to put all my effort into framing my anti-racism in the capitalist context. So it's not quite an answer, but those are my thoughts that are in the same general arena.
Yeah, but not the same.
I think some of it too is that she talked a little bit about we are such a wealthy nation because our biggest companies and industries had free labor for a long time. There was a huge, cotton was king in produced in the South but sold to the North, sold across, all over the world really. And that mentality that we have to pay people nothing, you know, and when slavery ended, you know, sharecropping started, which is slavery in a different name. And I think that's the mentality to use up people for your benefit. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think that's a big part of it, because the opulence and the grandeur that you see of the old homes, it's because they didn't have to pay people to work, and they had people that literally built those homes and they didn't have to pay them. So I think that's part of it that I can't really flesh out right now, but I think that's part of it.
And I just wanted to say, so I don't know if you were here for the TED Talk, but she talks about the Lehman Brothers. And in the book, she gives you a history of the Lehman Brothers. They became an investment company, like investing in slave labor. So even these vestiges, you know, from antebellum times, we live with that, and it still affects the way we interact, the way we engage with each other, and the public goods and accommodations that we share.
Sorry.
I think there's definitely some DNA in our capitalism that still sustains some of the racist structures that existed for a long time. Like you say, the North, the financiers in the North benefited from slavery in the South. I was just doing a little bit of research before coming here tonight. Earlier today, I was reading that in 1860, it was either the mayor of New York or the governor of New York that gave a speech saying that New York should also secede from the Union because the majority of its trade with Europe was cotton from the South going to Europe, and that if we got rid of slavery, it was going to cost them too much money.
Did you have your hand up, sir?
I'm JP. I live in Lexington. I was just like Clarissa said. I was going to say probably one of the first crops sold in America as part of capitalism would have been enslaved Black Africans. So, you know, the point was just made for me. Thank you.
Sorry.
But then you also but you stopped at sharecropping, but now we have prisons. We still keep making that free labor somehow or another.
My question is for Mr. Green. I was particularly taken by the op-ed that you wrote in February, the one that we have been referencing about making the pie available for more of us. It will grow GDP and it will enable all of us to benefit. And so my question specifically is about any feedback you received as a result of that op-ed, which I thought for the Lane report was very brave of you. You may not have seen it in such a brave way, but you told the truth to power.
Well, I wondered if there was going to be feedback, and I got no negative feedback. For the first time ever, I got invited to come speak in 2 different places as a result of writing that. In my career in journalism, I participated in public polling, starting when I was a student at UK. People always, it's a truism that individuals tend to be more liberal than they project, and they assume everybody else is more conservative, and they're afraid to say what they really think. And because they'll be criticized for not being conservative enough. And I mean, we see that going on all the time in politics, especially. But there was no negative feedback. And I made intentionally the focus on we will all benefit if we would make an effort to close the race gap. It's going to create more wealth for everybody. We don't look enough at how GDP is is a compounding of interest. It grows and grows and grows, and there's really a lot of money being created. And if we grow our economy regularly, steadily, we can pay for everything. We can, I think a lot of just about everybody here in this room can remember late in the Clinton administration, the economy was growing so much. We were on track to pay off the national debt. They turned off the national debt clock in New York City, and we were set to have it paid off. And the financial community was thinking, wait a minute, who's gonna buy our T-bills if we don't have a national debt? And then the Bush administration said, those tax dollars you should have that back. And so the tax rate has been cut and cut and cut a few more times.
And so could I follow that quickly? So since you have answered the question and indicated that you had no negative feedback and in fact had some positivity,
Yeah.
can we expect to see more of that in your opinion writing with the Lane report?
Well, I will always look for opportunities to do that, and just try to get people to think differently and think in that more communal manner. We need to, I think, expand our tribe. We're in our tribes, but we really, need to think about the tribe being, not just our part of town, our racial group, our financial, economic class, but the whole community is our tribe. The whole state is our tribe. The whole country is our tribe, and we can really, we will benefit if we try to help everybody in the tribe that is an expanded cohort. I try to get when I write about state politics, I try to talk about the benefits of nonpartisanship and non-divisiveness, and give credit and say, the state's getting these wonderful projects, these billion-dollar car battery plants, because Frankfurt has been maybe not perfect, but maybe less divisive than a few other states, and try to work together and try to tell the business community that we want to help you and take you in and help you win, because we'll win if you win.
So I think that's going to conclude our discussion tonight. I thank you all for coming out and being part of this talk sponsored by the Lexington Public Library. And so now we're going to turn over to Clarissa Thomas to...
Do I have to stand up? Oh, no, I'm good, thank you. I just want to echo everyone's sentiments and thank everybody for coming out. I think this was a very fruitful conversation, eye-opening, and let's next steps. What are some next steps? So watch the TED Talk again. Ask someone that you know to watch it that may not share these views, a family member, a colleague. If you haven't done so, read The Sum of Us. And there's some other books that I mentioned. The Color of Law is a really good one. The New Jim Crow, which talks about the mass incarceration. Those are good ones and backed up with statistics and facts similar to Heather McGee's. Become engaged in the Solidarity Dividend and efforts to dismantle racial discrimination. You can support the Lexington Black Prosperity Initiative through BGCF, through activities and donations. And lastly, support businesses that commit and sign the Racial Equity Pledge. You can find that on Commerce Lexington's website. Those that sign it, let them know that it will benefit them monetarily if they make that commitment by shopping and supporting them. So thank you all again for coming. We really appreciate it.